Hey everyone, and Happy New Year. I know it's a little late in the game to be saying that, but I just wanted to say that. I've been completely swamped with projects, so I haven't had a moment to make a new video. I'm also letting you know that I'm working on more and trying to be a little bit more consistent with releasing more videos to help you take your next step forward with your music. Now, I'm going to be featuring in this video a simple walkthrough of the analog in Ableton Live, and some of the principles you're going to be learning can be applied on any synthesizer that you're using. But this is a video taken from my online music production bootcamp resource. It's a resource that helps you go from A to Z of producing your music and positioning yourself for success with your music career. So if you want more information about this music production bootcamp, just click the link below in the description box and enjoy the video. So let's continue walking through breaking down the synthesizer. So we started in our oscillator, and we moved over to your filter, over to your amp envelope, and now we head over to a section called LFO. And this is usually the signal flow for every synthesizer. You would typically go from your oscillator, choose a waveform to oscillate, and then you would go to your filter so that you can filter out frequencies you don't want or resonate, meaning accent certain frequencies. Then you would head to your amp envelope where you kind of mold and shape. Is it going to be a long tone? Is it going to be short and staccato, or like when you play it, does it hang over after you release the keys? Does it play long? Does it sustain? You would do all that in your amp envelope. And we've got this nice little graph here to kind of show you a representation of exactly what your sound is looking like, or the actual slope of the sound. Then we head over to our LFO. And here, what this stands for is your low frequency oscillator. This basically means this is going to oscillate or move your sound with a low frequency that you really can't hear, but yet it adds the effect of moving or just adding movement to your sound. Now, what I mean by that is when you play a trumpet or when you play a string instrument or an actual acoustical instrument, there are vibrations and there is modulation. There is something going on to keep the tone just from being dead on like a dial tone, like this. So instead of just hearing this all the way through, you can notice that the sound is just dead straight. There's no movement. There's no, wobbling of the tone, so to speak. And so in order to add movement in there, in order to add some fluctuation to that, you could use an LFO to do this. Now, LFOs are a great tool to really shape the overall. So amp is usually the amp envelope. You would shape the sound, but LFO is how you actually gives a little bit more character to the sound that you're creating by actually adding some movement to it. So let's do an example here. So we have the sine wave. We've got the filter, a low pass filter. Remember, low pass LP only lets the lows pass. We've got an amp envelope. We've got it set here. And now what I'm going to do with the LFO is, now that we have it on, we have to assign what it is that we're going to oscillate. Now, usually in every synthesizer, and we're going to open up a couple other synths so you can take a look, but in this case, the LFO needs to be assigned to something. Hey, what do you want us to move? That's kind of like what the LFO is saying. It's like, what is it that you want us to add movement to? Do you want us to add movement to the pitch? To the filter? I mean, what? So for right now, let's go to oscillator. And I hope this is making sense, because what we're about to do is we're going to take this dial tone, or this just singular tone that's pretty boring, and we're going to add a little bit of movement in there. So what I'm going to do is, inside the pitch section for the oscillator, inside the oscillator section, right here in the black box, you notice right here the pitch modulation, meaning pitch mod, or pitch modulating, meaning that there's influxes, there's changes going on during the duration of that sound. So we're going to go to LFO1, and we're going to assign some pitch modulation to LFO1. So we click this, and we'll just increase that slightly. And we'll start there. And if I press my key again, now you can hear how it's going up and down in pitch. And so the rate at which it goes up and down is determined by the rate here at the LFO. So if we hit this this note and increase the rate, you kind of get the picture. If we slow down the rate, And this picture gives you a good representation of what it's actually doing. It's adding a low frequency to oscillate your sound to go up and then down. So the higher the rate, the more frequent it's going to be traveling up and down. You can also change the type of waveform. So right now, as you can see, it's on a sine. This is exactly what the sine wave is doing. You can click this and choose your square or rectangle. You can choose a triangle. And they have a couple other options here, which would be noise, which is kind of random. Okay? For right now, we'll leave it at sine. So you can head back to your oscillator, and the more you assign to the LFO at the pitch, the more drastic this will be. So if I just max it out and went over to 1.00, we're gonna have a very drastic LFO. That's going from really, really low to really, really high. So immediately you can hear, by just tweaking an oscillator and running it through an LFO, you can use this to make some really good transition effects, some sweeps and bleeps, and we'll talk about automating down the road, but I can actually record myself just tweaking that rate on the LFO for a great little build-up, and it makes a great transition for a build into something. So that's assigning the LFO to the pitch. We'll bring that back down 10. And you can also go backwards and negative, which have the same effect, but just starting from high to low instead of from low to high. Next, you can actually assign the filter to your LFO. Just click on any section and head over to the LFO 1 and just click and say, hey, I want to crank this up. Meaning when I change the number value to higher, when that number value goes higher, that means I'm assigning more and more to the LFO. And the only thing I have to really worry about in the LFO is how fast it's going to be affected. That's the rate of the LFO. So here we have LFO 1 on the filter envelope. And nothing's really happening. And can you guess why? Because the filter isn't really filtering out anything. It's not really doing any changes. So let's go ahead and try bringing the filter down. Because now the filter is actually doing something. It's filtering out frequencies that we don't want to hear. And I'm going to crank more of that to the LFO. And we can change the rate here. So this is really where you would get that nice little wobble type of vibe if we were doing, like, let's say, a dubstep bass. I switch it over to sawtooth so I can just hit more presence. And now we can increase the rate. We can go an octave lower to get a nice, fatter, richer tone. And all I'm doing is adjusting the rate. Now, the rate is currently set to, if you notice the number here, it's 7.7 hertz. It's actually going by time, or hertz, frequencies. So you can set it to sync up with the current tempo that you're at. And we can do that by clicking that little note icon here, and that changes it from hertz to actual tempo. So now it's set to go up and down at every quarter note value. And it's in sync with my tempo. So it's really not that complicated. Every synthesizer works in the same way. So I'm going to draw up a synthesizer in a bit to kind of show you where some of the common ground is, and you could dive directly into getting the sound that you're looking for. See, we started at our oscillator. We picked a waveform we wanted to use. We filtered out frequencies we don't want to hear, if we wanted just the lows of that sound to pass or the high pass. And then we went to the amp envelope to shape it, to make sure that the sound, if it was going to be, I had a longer release, meaning that when I let go of the keys, will it still play after that? Is it going to be a short and plucky type of sound? It all depends on the amp envelope. The amp envelope is what we use to shape the actual sound. And then we always go from the amp to your LFO. Are you going to add movement to this? Or is it just going to be a plain one tone? So if we add some movement to this, I'll add the rate down. So it's very drastic. It's going at a 1 bar rate. So I'm going to go back over here to the filter, and let's just take off the LFO. It's very drastic. And I'll go back to the oscillator here, and we'll just give a little bit to the LFO one once again. And this time I'll put it back on her. And you can hear it's actually just moving. So you can crank it up and get an overall different type of tone. Now we can assign another oscillator to be to be triggered, and this is going to allow us to now combine what we've created on the top here with oscillator 1 with the oscillator 2 on the bottom. Now before we continue there, I want to focus your attention on this volume section, and this is just the overall master section for the analog. And so they have this thing here on the analog called quick routing, and this is just a diagram to show you how the sound is actually routed. See, right now it's currently set to this, in which oscillator 1 and 2 are going to both go out of filters 1 and the amp envelope 1. That's on the top. You can see that right here. 1 and 2 are going to get routed to using one filter. Or you can have it parallel where everybody with both oscillators are independent. So oscillator 1 stays on the top row, and oscillator 2 will stay on the bottom row. So that means oscillator 2 is independent and will have to go through its own filter and its own amp envelope. This is very useful if, let's say, you wanted to use one amp envelope to shape both oscillators. In this case, we'll do the bottom routing. So I'll turn off the LFO. So we're both using a sine wave on both. But here's what happens when you're using the same waveform and the same settings. Sounds a little weird, right? Well, that's called phasing. That means we have two sounds that are exactly the same, canceling each other out. So we can use our cool detune button, and that's right, I said cool because, well, I don't know, I just said it. So we're gonna use our detune button here to slightly detune one of the oscillators, like this. And this will actually widen it up so it's not exactly the same pitch, not exactly the same sound. And it gives that cool little chorus or widening effect.
Well, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it helped. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, this was just a snippet from my online music production bootcamp. If you want more details about the resources that I provide, definitely click the link below in the description box. I'd be more than happy to help you take your next step forward with your music production. For now, be sure to subscribe so that you can stay up to date with the upcoming videos that I'll be doing. Also, I love to hear from you. Please let me know in the comments below anything that you would like me to focus on or work on or release for upcoming videos. But also let me know what you thought about this one, if you thought it was helpful, and always interested to just create a dialogue with you guys. So let me know, comment below, subscribe, you know, stick your left foot out, do the hokey pokey, do all that good stuff, and I'll see you soon. Take care.